Welcome to the Align and Abide podcast with Dr. Kim Tran, where we help you achieve your greatest God-given potential. Now, let's get started with the show.
Tran of Minnesota Family Chiropractic on Align and Abide.
Hey, it's Dr. Kim Tran. I host Align and Abide podcast where we explore ways to elevate your life through holistic health and wellness, personal development, and entrepreneurship. Together, we'll uncover how you can invest in your greatest asset, your health, and achieve your God-given potential. Past guests have included 3,000 Acts of Kindness, Pastor Marsha King, Foster One, and Alzheimer's Association. This episode is brought to you by Minnesota Family Chiropractic, a Christian chiropractic and integrative health clinic founded and led by Dr. Kim Tran, dedicated to helping patients find lasting relief and vibrant health through chiropractic care, nutrition, acupuncture, functional medicine, and inner healing prayer. Minnesota Family Chiropractic is on a mission to transform lives physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Our team of doctors focuses on whole person care to address the root causes, not just the symptoms, and so you can get back to living fully. Ready to start your path towards better health? Visit drkimtran.com or call 612-545-5672. Well, my special guest on today, I have to thank one of my greatest friends, Patrice, who has been a spiritual warrior, like when it comes to prayer. And, you know, when I tell you, you need friends that are your spiritual warriors when you're going through some of the hardest trials. And when she knew I was under attack for being a Christian chiropractor, she's like, you know what? We need to surround you. We need to uplift you. And so she invited me to come to a Tuesday night delivery at the Hub in Burnsville with Pastor Dr. Charles Karuku, which I am so blessed because, you know, she invited me out and I just thought, I'm like, wow, like, look at this. This is what I talk about, right? Delivering people and knowing that God can heal, right? Every physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual problem, right? And I know this is a huge passion for you, Dr.
Yes,
Charles, right?
I know.
And I know you're like, wait.
Well, we share a lot in common because we are in the same team of getting people whole, spirit, soul, body. Mm-hmm. And so I just love what you do, Dr. Kim. I love the holistic approach you have. And you are understanding of the spiritual component to healing, which is very key. And so I highly recommend doctors like you because many doctors out there, they're just a two-legged stool. They are dealing only with the physical and some of them emotional, but there is doctors taking it all, the spirit, soul, body, and they are working to make people whole. And
yeah, it's just a blessing. But I feel like that's a calling. It's like I've always mentioned to business owners, or it doesn't matter. Each of us has a calling, but our calling was meant to be different because we're meant to reach different people. And yes, both Dr. Charles and I were actually at the 3,000 Acts of Kindness event yesterday. Well, you know, over at the Minneapolis Convention Center. And I didn't get to go right away that morning. I actually came in with one of my other team members, Maria, and we had bags full of coats and winter gear. And I thought, okay, you know, I was asking Pastor Marsha, I was like, are you okay if we still come? Like, we still have stuff. And while we were walking there from where we parked, other people are walking out. And I see their backs of 3,000 Acts of Kindness. And I had passed this woman and she was like, do you have any coats? The line was so long and they were running out of coats. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And so this woman, Kathy, I stopped her and I said, well, Kathy, I feel so called. Like, what can I pray for you? How can I pray for you? And she's like, could you pray for my healing? And I'm like, absolutely. So in the process of giving her a coat, I put my hand on her and I said, I was like, let me pray over you. And mind you, you know, like the original thought, she's like, well, I'm Dr. Kim. And she's like, well, what type of doctor are you? And I was like, I'm a chiropractor. She's like, oh, that's not a doctor. And I'm like, she's like, well, that's not the doctor you're used to, right? And I said, well, but I said, you know, she's like, but I've been an alcoholic. I have cirrhosis in my liver. And he said, but God will heal.
Amen.
Your liver, he will completely heal you of this addiction. And that's what I was praying over her. And she just couldn't believe it that somebody else would stop on the street and just pray over her.
Especially a doctor, and not say, go take this medication, go do that. Because doctors are great. Medication can work and it works. But we need to understand only God can heal. We can treat, we can do everything. And what an act of kindness. I was there too. And I can tell you, it is people like you and us coming together to be able to reach over 3,800 people who showed up yesterday and to be able to be hands and feet of Jesus. The problem with our city is so humongous that it will take a whole community coming together. And thank you for your partnership.
Yeah, well, and I think this is the theme that we have been talking about for so long, is that, you know, kingdom businesses as ministries, right? And the church is the people. And we are called right now, and God is really calling each and every one of you to minister in our neighborhoods, to our, to minister to the people around us.
Yes.
I know we keep searching out because it sounds much more fancy when we're going to go to Asia or go somewhere else, but our city is in need. Our state is in so great need. And what happens is, if we start connecting with people, if we start loving up on them, if we start trying to stop pitting each other, because that's a demonic thing.
It's demonic.
Yeah.
You know, I have this saying talking about going to Asia. I actually love Asia. I know I'm from Africa. I know you're from Asia originally, but we love the nations. That's like on my motherland. But I always say, we cannot continue flying over a mission field to go to a mission field where we are actually in a mission field.
Yes.
We have the largest Somali population, the largest Ethiopian population, the largest Liberian population, Russian population, and Hmong population. And this is a very rich mission field. We can do 3,000 acts of kindness every day and not exhaust the need of this city. So our homegrown missions must begin to be strengthened. And so what you guys are doing, even with your business and your ministry combined, it's a great joy to this city. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks. Now, you know, the reason why I want to always share this as a testimony, because our trials are always a testimony, and God wants us to share them. Even, and many of you had heard me cry about this. You've heard me do many other things. And yeah, I invited Dr. Charles on just because, you know, he was part of that.
Thank you.
And I just think, wow, God, you really moved when you knew I needed it. And so there's a lot of times that at the end of service, we open up and you always invite people, and this is at any church, and where, hey, come up and receive prayer. And I think the hard part about that is many of us don't feel we want to come up and be in the centerfold of that. Like, but you know, in that moment, my friend's like, here, you need it. Patrice pulls me up. She's like, look, right? And I actually
She's a warrior. She would not let you stay out there. She's like, come on in.
Let's go. Well, and this is what I remind people of, is that you need prayer for yourself too.
Absolutely.
And even those that we think are the strongest, right? And we need to pray over our pastors. We need to pray over those that are strong in our ministry, because they need prayer too, by the way. But coming up, we're going to be talking about what did we actually pray about and how that can work in your life. And give you that spiritual breakthrough that you are looking for. And if you want more information, you can go to drkimtran.com. That's drkimtran.com. Pastor Dr. Charles Karuku of the Hub in Burnsville. And it's just such a blessing and honor to have you.
Thank you. So grateful to be here, Dr. Kim.
Yeah, I find that God has a way of connecting people when you're most in need, right? Or those that, he brings around people. And many of us have gone through times where we've felt isolated, alone, probably in our worst moments. Mm-hmm. And we start to think, wow, why, God, are you isolating me? Why are you abandoning me? But it's not God, it's the enemy. The enemy will take and turn your family away from you, turn your friends away from you. And you start to want to believe that it's God, but it's not. And yet God will fill in different friends, those that are close, the people that will become your spiritual warriors, and he will reclaim that with something so much greater than you can even imagine, right?
Come on,
absolutely, Jesus. Right? And so when my friend Patrice brought me in, and mind you, many of us have probably sat through church and then we've needed it. But yet sometimes we've needed that prayer. We needed it to, I think about right after, over 3 years ago, when I was mentioning to many of you that I was raped at a conference by a doctor that was married, and I felt so much shame even sitting into the church, right? And people would see me worship and cry, and they'd be like, wow, she's just so powerful. And they just didn't understand. But yet I probably needed that prayer at that time. But there's something else that, and I do want you to realize this, when we go through traumas like that, when we share those things specifically with those that we can most trust, meaning we don't have to share it with everyone, but you want to be around those that can pray around you, that can uplift you, that can hold you. And I think in that moment, I look back and I thought, okay, maybe it was the church. And many of you have probably been to church in those moments. And the enemy uses that, that spirit of shame. He uses those things to try to make you think, oh, wait, well, I went to church, but nobody accepted me. Well, it's also because you didn't want to let them in, right? And so when Patrice, knowing that I was going through this major spiritual battle, and many people didn't want me to say, you know what, go get a lawyer. And I was like, no, God told me he is the greatest Jewish attorney I'm ever going to have. Trust me. And, we went up, and, we were praying over this, and this is how powerful this is. That specific night, we were talking about unforgiveness.
Yes.
And so I thought, okay, and I go through, and this is what I want you to think about. Unforgiveness will block your healing.
Exactly.
It will block your own healing. It will block your pastings. So sometimes you got to think, okay, where do I need to forgive? Who do I need to forgive?
Correct.
And sometimes, by the way, that is yourself.
And I'm glad you're telling the story of forgiveness, because I had to go through forgiving the man who killed my dad.
Oh.
And I ended up writing the book on forgiveness therapy, when forgiveness is the only cure. I learned a lot about forgiveness through that experience, that sometimes you need to forgive yourself, especially when it comes to shame-based identity, when you're dealing with a lot of shame for something that you have done or participated in. And the enemy is called in the Bible, the book of Revelation 11, the accuser of brethren, who accuses us before the Lord day and night. It's a 24/7 full-time job for the enemy to accuse. He is not an intercessor. He does not stand in the gap. He is an accuser. He accuses. He talks against us to the Lord. But then this accusation is in different levels, accusing us to God, saying, look what they have done. Then turn around, accuses God to us. God doesn't love you. Accuses people to each other. Look, turning each other against each other. And then accusing us to ourselves. and saying, it's you. You have won nothing. You are no good. You should kill yourself. And these voices of accusation, we must learn how to silence them through prayer, taking it to the throne room of God and saying, I am forgiven. I'm washed with the blood. I refuse to receive these voices of accusation. I receive the voice of mercy, the voice of acceptance, the voice of love that comes from my Father.
Yeah, absolutely. And grace.
And grace. It's
absolutely.
A lot of grace there.
and I want you to realize this is so powerful because, I want you to challenge yourself. Where are you not forgiving? Whether it's God, whether it is your spouse, whether it's a family member, whether it's just maybe just yourself or things that people have done against you. Because remember, forgiveness is for you. It is so much for you. And please don't think that I've forgiven everyone. If you've forgiven everyone and you still talk about them and it causes some emotional stir, you have not forgiven.
It means there's still some active pain and bitterness there. And I think that's a very key thing, because there's 2 steps to forgiveness. The one is forgiving them, where you do an act of your will just because the Bible says so and it pleases God. It's not based on a feeling, it's a choice. But then that choice does not remove the feeling. The feeling is removed by letting go. And letting go again is where we release those things to God and we leave them on the altar. Now, how do you do that practically? Every time there's a reminder in your heart and you feel that tweaking of your soul, like that sharpness that comes in, remind yourself and remind the enemy and speak it out loud. I have forgiven Charles. I've let him go. I leave him on the altar. And pray blessings. This turns things around. Pray blessings on those who you have forgiven. And nothing makes forgiveness stick around like beginning to pray blessings over people.
And it can be hard, right? Especially when they've done things to you. But I want you to remember, it says in the Bible, the vengeance is not yours, it is God's.
I will repay.
Yeah, he will repair it. And so sometimes we think, we've got to do this to that person because look what they did to me. Give them up to God. The biggest thing that I always try to remember too is that people did hurtful things because somebody hurt them. And they've got a lot of unforgiveness. We have to remember that the enemy uses the people closest to us to try to hurt us. So they might do things unintentionally that they don't even remember.
Some of the people don't remember.
Yeah.
And so we carry these things while those who have done them probably are moving on with their lives and they have no recollection of what happened.
Yeah, because literally the enemy used them in that moment. And so during that time, I kept thinking, okay, how many people involved in this case do I need to forgive? Which was a whole, and it's not that I hadn't been working on it, but it reminded me at that moment. I'm like, okay, let me forgive them for everything, right? Because they've got a lot of hurt. They've got a lot of pain. And in that process, we had sat down and, stood, and we started praying that God would take my case to the courts of heaven.
Yes.
And this is so important. And many of you, we can look back at my show that I recorded over the summer on, taking your case to the courts of heaven. We have to pray and petition God to take it and you have to completely trust God, because if a case does not make sense here, and this is how you know that it is spiritual warfare. If all the things that you are saying are true and you know that they're representing a lie, but yet everything seems turned against you and they've made you convicted. They convicted you. I was called guilty of a false crime, of a false of a false lie. And I thought, how do you not see this? And I knew right then and there that it was spiritual warfare. This is not a case that was meant to be fought on earth. It was meant to be fought in the heavens first.
Every believer, Dr. Kim, needs to know what you have learned about taking a case to the courts of heaven, because there is a higher court where God is the judge, the Holy Spirit is our counsel, Jesus is our advocate, and the angels are our witnesses. They help with execution of justice. The throne of God is built on righteousness and justice as the foundation. And so justice is something very close to God's heart. Without that, God's throne does not even exist without that foundation. And so it pleases God to see his people acquainted of injustices, whether it's things that you've been spoken out against. And that's why we need to know how to go boldly to the throne of grace, find mercy and grace in the time of need. And that is how we approach the courts of heaven.
Absolutely. And coming up, we're going to be talking about how much more, if you need to take your case to the courts of heaven, how can you do that? And now realizing that sometimes when God's working for you, he might be silent. It doesn't mean he's not working. He's just making a way. And, I truly pray that this is going to reach those of you who know that you're up against a spiritual battle. And we're going to be talking about how to equip yourself coming up. And you can find out more information at drkimtran.com. That's drkimtran.com. Such a blessing to be able to share with you, because I know many of you are up against a spiritual battle. It might feel like an earthly battle, but if it doesn't make sense, if you know that you're coming up against false allegations, false witnesses, then you know it is of the enemy. And this is why it's so important to take your case to the courts of heaven.
Absolutely.
Right.
And Dr. Kim, you have done that successfully, because where do you go when the Supreme Court of the United States comes against you and passes something that could violate your justice? Where else do you go? And so God has put a higher court above the Supreme Court. And we learned this with the Roe v. Wade, because the Roe v. Wade was completely passed by the Supreme Court 50-something years ago. And there was nowhere else to go. And people believed that is it. And a man who ended up being someone I ended up getting to know, his name is Lou Ingo. He began to pray, and the Lord led him to a court, a basketball court that is above the Supreme Court. And as he was going to play basketball there and do prayer, the Lord told him, I have set up a court above the Supreme Court, and you can go and petition me, and I'll come down with justice and righteousness. And that's how they began to pray for the miracle that happened to reverse Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
And so we have learned from the Bible that you can petition God above every other court by going before him and repenting of your personal sin, examining your heart, and then praying forgiveness over those who have accused you, and then begin to address every evidence they have laid against you and begin to nullify one after another. For example, where they have accused you and called you guilty, begin to ask the Lord to vindicate you and call you righteous, because that's what he calls you. And where you're guilty, admit your guilt, repent before God, and turn it into righteousness. And so when you go before God with that, there is no more accusation in the hands of the prosecutor, the devil. He can no longer accuse you. And that's how you successfully silence his voice and then begin to declare what God says above what the accuser has said. And you begin to turn it around, that God says, I am whole, I am holy, I'm sanctified, I'm vindicated, I have the mercy, I have the grace, I have the favor, I have the justice. You begin to speak that, and it shifts things even in the other realm. Cases are dismissed, you are acquitted, you are discharged, and everything is overturned like the way Roe v. Wade was overturned.
Yeah. And I was mentioning and sharing with Dr. Charles is that when I hear from God, I write it all down. I date it. And I was actually showing him like the book, right? Because, during the conciliation, even on the day that they had already convicted me and I still was pleading my innocence, and I have it. And this is the thing, God is going to keep whispering to you his message. It's not always shouted. And I was sharing this with him as that this was the message that I heard, and this is what the message that you need to hear too, is that I am convicted. God and I have won my case in the courts of heaven and earth. And you're thinking, okay, that's what I'm hearing. And yet, even in the darkest times, by the way, it was God and I against everyone else. Like that is, this is a case.
Yeah.
I didn't get a physical lawyer. And by the way, I have many lawyers that are friends, right? And, even then God had said, I am convicted that, and this is what he wanted me to believe. I'm convicted. My case is closed, and I will be a testimony for other Christian business owners. Many of you have been so prosecuted. We've been so held back into thinking that we can't share our faith. But God wants us to be even more bold. He is accelerating. And this is what I've mentioned to you since September, right? God is in this season of acceleration and increase of all the kingdom businesses and ministries. Can you imagine that? Like massive things are happening. And what I kept reminding myself during this time, and you had to be grounded in the word. When you are going through a case like this, you need to be grounded in the word. You need to be grounded in prayer. I spent a lot of time by myself sometimes. I also needed my spiritual warriors. I had that small group. I didn't tell everyone, but I had that small group. And Deuteronomy 28 was like my ongoing chapter, right? And many of you know I've quoted Deuteronomy 28 so much this last year. And, and this was so true. I look back and it says, right, as God has promised in Deuteronomy 28:7, the Lord will grant that the enemies who rise up against you will be defeated before you. They will come at you from one direction and flee from you in seven. Just like all of those will flee from me. And they did. And God made that happen. And I just think, but that came with faith.
Come on.
Right.
And you have had this victory that was very massive victory over this, this false accusation. And I think this is not just about a case in court. Some of the people are dealing with sicknesses
Absolutely.
and infirmities that have lingered in the family. And they could be rooted into some generational sin, some generational curses, some trauma that was done, something either passed down generationally or something that was done to you, like rape, molestation, abuse, divorce. It could even be something you did, and it could be consequences of your own actions. And then the enemy is holding all that over your head and accusing you before God and hindering your breakthrough because of that. For me, it was my father who died when I was in the womb. And the man who killed him was still running around. He took his land, he killed my dad, and pretty much robbed us of a childhood with a father. And I was so mad at him. And my anger against him was something the enemy was using, that unforgiveness. He was using it to hinder my blessings. And the more I began to get more passionate with God, the Lord began to show me there is one thing you need to deal with. You need to forgive the man who killed your dad. I had to go and find this man. He was 90 years old. He was blind. And we had this massive moment of reconciliation where we came from being the worst enemies to best friend. He ended up asking me to come and do his funeral when he passes away. And I'll say this, that moment of healing of this wound of over 40 years opened a door for me. And I can tell you, before that and after, the blessings that have come on me have been incredible. And one of them was the opportunity we had in Minneapolis when George Floyd died in 2020, May 26, 2020, when we went to the city of Minneapolis and turned a riot to a revival, was because I told the story of how I forgave the guy who killed my dad. And I said, we have to forgive, no matter how this case looks like with the George Floyd, we have to forgive. And after forgiving, that's how the healing will happen. That story broke through into the hearts of people. The riot stopped, the revival broke out. We stayed there for 3 months, and then it changed my ministry, and we became a national ministry within 30 days. And our ministry broke through in ways we've never seen before. To this day, we could not be where we are if it was not for that moment of forgiving of the man who killed my dad. It's what turned the chapter for the rest of my life.
So I think about this. How many of you have a major thing to forgive? Maybe it's God. Maybe it's your father, your mother, your family. Perhaps now, when we talk about forgiveness, and many of you know, I did not grow up in a great childhood home, right? And part of what I do here, it's when I share these stories, it's because God has always given me a vision of my family being at peace and being unified, even if that's not what it may look like. And so sometimes in that process, forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean that you reestablish that relationship right away, by the way. So especially if you've been coming out of an abusive home or relationship, forgiveness means that you can forgive them, give them up to God, pray over them, but you can still establish that boundary until God allows his work to be done in them, which is so important. And I want you to realize is that, maybe it turns out that it's like Dr. Charles, where you're like, okay, I forgive the man who killed my father and then became one of your best friends, right? But how much hurt did that man have, right? And imagine what happens when we start to forgive and we start to love up on people, when we start showing grace to those in our community, because, wow, there is so much hate going on right now. And, we want to pray for peace and unity and love and grace over each and every person today. And if you're looking for more information, you can go to drkimtran.com, or you can also go to the Hub. Come to their revival nights on Tuesday nights, and you will be welcomed.
Amen.
When we talk about it, many of you are dealing with some major spiritual warfare, and it doesn't take that much. You can go online on Facebook, and especially our state right now, it is full-blown spiritual warfare right now. And for many of you who, not this last September, but last September before this, you joined me in 10 days of prayer and fasting for our state. Did we ever think that it would come to this point where we're moving, where we're seeing revival? And I also want to talk about this. When you are going through a major spiritual warfare, now, unforgiveness, absolutely. Take your case up to the courts of heaven, do forgiveness. Yet also the other powerful thing that I know many of you are like, oh no, she's not going to mention this again. Prayer and fasting. If you want demons to flee, if you were looking for major breakthroughs in your life and business, you must fast.
Absolutely. And I encourage people to do it regularly, at least once a week. Take a day, one day a week. For me, it's Tuesday. Today is my day of fasting and prayer. And I encourage people to do that. Every beginning of the year, we do 21 days of prayer and fasting. And I encourage people, if you want to sharpen your axe, sharpen your tools, and be sharp in the spirit, you need to kill the flesh and give the spirit man an opportunity to thrive and flourish. And you deny the physical man food, you give an opportunity to the spiritual man to grow and rise so you can operate in the realm of the spirit more. And when you fast, make sure you read the word and make sure you have time for prayer. Because prayer without fasting, fasting without prayer is pretty much a hunger strike.
Well, and I think it's also important is that when you are fasting, don't go through it distracted. Many times we're like, oh, well, let me get distracted. And so sometimes you'll start doom scrolling on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. First of all, that's not from God, right? The enemy wants you so distracted that you can't hear from God. And many people don't know that I used fasting so much over the last few years when I was going through these major battles. And people are like, are you sure you fasted for 40 days? Because you don't look like it. And I'm like, yep, I know. Because the enemy uses, and I find this very, I want to share this because I know that for many of you women, right, it's not that men don't have the same issues, but the enemy contorts our bodies a lot. So when I went through and then I got raped and all of a sudden my body weight exploded up, it wasn't because I ate a ton. It was demonic warfare, right? And, a lot of those things happen because the enemy wants us in our points of shame to also feel more shame for ourselves, right? And so sometimes he'll use that to change and over your body. So for women, that might mean, and men, by the way, I'm not trying to exclude men from this, is that all of a sudden you might gain this massive amount of weight and people are going to be like, well, yeah, you got to stop eating your fast food, processed food, you got to exercise. And I'm like, you do know I fast, right? And I eat a very strict diet. I do these things. And they're like, what? And I was like, there's something, to be said for spiritual warfare. And I think when people are like, well, what do you mean you fast for 1 day? How can you fast for 3 days? More or less, how can you do a 40-day water fast? And I'm like, it can be done.
Wow.
It can absolutely be done. And it's because I've done it. I'm not saying it was easy by any means, but I needed it so much. I needed God so much, right? And we talk about Hannah in the Bible, how she brought it all to God. She bared it all in her worst moments. So what happens if you start bearing it all?
Wow. When you begin to bear it all. And, I love the idea of 40-day fast because only 3 people did it in the Bible. We have Jesus, we have Elijah, we have Moses. Those are the only documented ones. But look at their lives. Every one of those, when Jesus was transfigured, it's Moses and Elijah who showed up. So there is something very special that is highlighted about Jesus and Moses and Elijah. They were not buried. They went up with their body. We know Moses, his body was contended with by angels and Satan. So we have like these incredible generals that are in this group of 3 that fasted for 40 days. And I encourage people to fast for 40 days. When I did it, and I'll do it again too, it launched me into another level. And I think the key to fasting is to take you to a place called there. That place called there is where God has destined you to be. And when you get there, your life, your family, your mind, your mental health, your health, everything will never be the same again. God will launch you to a whole new level. And I believe in 2026 and beyond, everybody listening would love to go to the next level. And I would encourage you, begin with fasting.
Oh, and now I know some of you have struggled because I went through periods, and I share this in my own honesty, where I've gone through 21-day fast. I've gone through 40-day fast, and in the process of dealing with this case, I knew I needed to fast, but I felt so blocked, right? And I want you to realize that is one of the things that if you feel blocked to fast, then one of the ways that I started asking is, God, would you please reveal what is blocking me from fasting, right? And I want you to think about this. And part of that was, so when I went through 40-day fast, imagine that. You drink water for 40 days and then you lose no weight.
Jesus.
And so this is how big this attack was, right? And somebody was like, what do you mean? And I was like, I know. And that's when you know it is a demonic attack that is so big. But that also means that God has a great plan, because if the enemy wants to try that hard, then I'm like, okay, God, let's go. But after, going through a 40-day water fast and losing nothing, and then you're like thinking, okay, I'm still not looking the way that I know that God made me to be, right? And so that also kind of became a block, because I'm like, well, what's the point of me doing, and I share this because the enemy wants to use that. And said, well, look, see, you didn't lose any weight. It didn't matter that I had all these other breakthroughs, right? But I knew, right, that God had been calling me to be on a mission to share more videos, to share all the things that I share over the radio. And yet here, I'm like, well, how can I when I'm so stuck? But that ended up becoming a block, because that became an unforgiveness towards myself, right? And it wasn't me. It was like the enemy at that point.
And God will give you an answer of peace, because I think the key is to do it for the right reason. It's not an intermittent fast for just the physical body. You're doing it for spiritual. And I believe the Lord can reveal the spiritual roots of things. And so I appreciate you even sharing that, because it's been a major block to a lot of people. Others' major block is, I'm going to lose too much weight. I can't be healthy. And so it's two extremes.
Yeah, of course. And you have to understand, when you are praying and fasting for God, He is going to make sure that you are safe.
Thank you.
He will always ensure you never lose too much. But it's not for weight loss, by the way. Don't go into this with an intent for weight loss. This is to align yourself with God's will for your life, for your family, for your business, and watch what happens. And if you're looking for more information, Pastor Dr. Charles, where can they go to?
We can go to thehubnation.com, and we are here for you right here in Burnsville, Minnesota at The Hub.
Thank you so much for being on today.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Align and Abide podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.